Hello and welcome to Rock, Paper, Shotgun, and today it's a delight to be bringing you a chat that I recently had with Biomutant's creative director, Stefan Ljungqvist. Yes, that feline-like martial artist that you fell in love with after the game's first trailer is still coming. In this video you'll see some new gameplay, which is an utter delight, I'm sure you'll agree, but do keep in mind that the interview is about 3 times longer than the B-roll we were provided, so it will repeat. But that's okay, because it looks absolutely gorgeous. If you like this interview, then please do hit subscribe and then ring that bell. Perhaps we'll do more like this in the future. So, interview time. As it's been a while since we heard about Biomutant, I started by asking Stefan to give newcomers a brief synopsis on the game.
I think I used this description before. It's a mouthful, but it's a post-apocalyptic kung fu fable, and that's still true in a way. So a fable is quite obvious, right? You're playing as an animal or a mutant in this case, and I just go off on a little side branch here with this animal because we usually get the questions like, why did you choose a red panda? And for us, it's like, yeah, it's a little bit strange. I mean, I showed you one of my dogs, if you look at the nose of this red panda, you can see that it's quite similar to a Boston Terrier. But it's even more important, like, this is the character that we chose, to portray our version of the avatar that you're playing, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not that character specifically that you are playing in this game. So you're playing, if you go back to a fable, like an animal creature that you created. And they're not realistic animals. Like there are, we call them internally for Muppets, because you can really mutate them to look very strange. So basically there's 6 types of genetic strands, and let's look at them as a race or something. We call them breed. Mm-hmm. So within these strands, you can actually freely, if you're using a gamepad, freely mutate the look and the attributes and the anatomy of that character that you have chosen, the genetic strand. You can also remodify that genetic strand, and then you can do a new modification inside that. So you're truly free to choose to create your own character. So in terms of the narrative, I mean, we're not going to try to give you pointers in terms of a political message, but a fable in the classical term, something that's been used, for thousands of years with humanity. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about our real world now. We're still having a little bit of that influence. For example, in the game, and I tie that in now to the word I used, post-apocalyptic, in Biomutant, something has happened a while ago, right? So there was a post-apocalyptic event. So something, there was a world before that happened, but we are also now playing in the aftermath of that. That's when we come in and start playing. And this world that we are playing in is also dying. So the post-apocalyptic is maybe doubled in a way, but you are participating in, let's say, the second phase. And that phase is, centered around, this big tree of life, which is a symbol for the state of the world, if you will. The tree of life has a chance of survival at the beginning of the game, and your choice will dictate if you're trying to bring it down or if you're going to try to save it. And I might just answer the question, so why would I want to bring it down? Maybe there's a fresh restart for something like that too. Let's say a cleansing, right? So some players might choose to go one way, some might choose to go the other way. And the way that you do that choice is by allying with one of the 6 tribes that we have in the game. Mm. And coincidentally, they're also then linked to these 6 races that I talked about in the beginning. So there is some form of connection there as well. The other part of the fable is that everybody in the world is vegetarian except for one. There's only one meat eater left in the world. It's a predator. And if you've seen or remember the 2017 cinematic trailer, there's this big wolf-like character that chases the avatar or our version of the character in that trailer. And this is kind of your nemesis, antagonist of the game. So you will see him or meet him several times over the course of the game. So everybody else, all the crazy characters that we have, they're vegetarian. But this guy, he's the only predator left. And I don't know if that's a message or not, but I'm vegetarian, so blame it on me then. So maybe. Also, for those that doesn't know, we have a storyteller in the game, a narrator. So when you meet the character in the game, they're talking gibberish, right? So I call it like, let's say Star Wars language. And they're kind of quirky and weird, sounds funny. So this narrator, he's interpreting what they're saying and translating it for you. And sometimes these characters also, I've heard it from the dialogue I've written, like, yeah, you're trying to get across a message. Well, I didn't think about it, but if you say that, that's fantastic. So I guess that's the Fable and that's the Postapocalyptic. Kung Fu, you picked up on that. So there's many reasons for this. I mean, I used to train full contact Kung Fu for a long time. I trained 1 year with the Shaolin monk as well before I fucked up my back. Sorry for using that word. So I can't do that anymore. But so I'm heavily inspired, by Asian culture, and you can also see that in the art direction and visual design that we're trying to do together as a team to pick up on those notes. The Kung Fu part is more about the gameplay, so the ability to mix shooting. So we call it internally as gun fu, right? So if you've seen a John Woo movie or The Matrix or one of my favorite games, Max Payne, you will understand a little bit about that freedom. So moving and shooting at the same time, kind of have this like a little bit of more time in terms of gameplay where you're hanging in the air and can make another gameplay choice. So we have that. You can also mix and match gunplay into that with special, more Kung Fu-esque moves. And you can also freely then combine that with unarmed, let's say, martial art combat, and also armed combat that ties into the extensive crafting system that we have. Tying that back also in terms of the Kung Fu aspect. So in Kung Fu, the basic is Wushu. So that also includes weapons. And we have that too. So the 6 different tribes, they were disciples of this, let's say, inventor of this Wang Fu. We call it Wang Fu, the martial arts style that everybody's using in the game, and it happens to be your mother. So I'm spoiling it a little bit, but it's not a super reveal. But those are 6 tribe weapons. So by allying with a tribe, you can also earn the right to wield that tribe weapon. So that's also another incentive to try to find these tribes and choosing the right ally. And helping that ally to conquer the other tribes. At the core, in terms of the gameplay, it's an RPG, right? And it's truly open world. So it's an 8x8 kilometer big map. When I say RPG, it's really true. Like you're creating your character, like I described before. So that goes into race, and the look of the characters is tied to the attributes. So you have to make a choice there, and then you also choose class. So, but the classes are a little bit weird. But you have like Psy Freak, it's a Psy mutant that uses more like X-Men style of abilities. So let's say magic user, if this would have been a fantasy RPG. Then you have a Deadeye, which is a little bit more, the character that you've seen in the cinematic trailers. So he's both able to use a two-handed sword and a one-handed gun. Then you have a Commando, for example. He looks like Rambo. So he has a bandana and, bullet belt, but he's a furry animal. So there's 7 classes in total. So you choose a class, and that will also give you your basic weapon proficiencies and basic skills, passive skills. So it's an important choice in the beginning, but obviously you can use upgrade points as you get XP, level up, to unlock more of those. When you actually see the open world for the first time, it's a big vista. So let's say it takes about 30 minutes for the average player. Then you're free to go anywhere you want. And then you have 8x8 kilometers. So structurally there, it's very similar to Zelda Breath of the Wild, right? You can go anywhere. But it's going to be quite difficult for you, I assure you. If you just go like run the farthest you can into the world, that's going to be a little bit hard for you. And also there are some areas that we are requiring you to use. For example, there's a archipelago or like it's water, right? With islands, and you cannot swim. So you're going to have to use something we call a goo glide. So it's a watt ski that's customizable. And for example, in the dead zone that has low oxygen, you're going to have to use either the mech or also, again, coming back to crafting, because you can craft gear, you're going to have to find, in terms of loot, gas masks or, packs of oxygen to put on your back in order to go deeper into the dead zone. And on that theme, we also have biohazard zones, radioactive zones, cold zones, heat zones, that also then respectively go back into gear, right? So we are gating you in different ways. And on that subject, there's also some other areas that we require you to use. I'm looking a little bit like, I don't want to reveal too much. Let's say other vehicles that you have to have in order to reach them. But then you also have the mutations, right? Like we have some crazy mutations that ties back, let's call it Metroid style of gameplay. Like you have to use abilities to reach some places that you can't otherwise if you don't have those abilities, or you don't have the upgraded version of those abilities. You also have some, let's call it tools. So you have this little sidekick, the mechanical, automaton, the cricket. So he'll be able to provide you with some other means of transportation. So that will allow you to get to other places where you previously couldn't go to. So structurally, a little bit more like Zelda. I think we are a little bit more focused on the action part, I think, in a way, if I compare it, even though that's also quite focused on action. And we try to amp up the weirdness.
Stefan, that was the most in-depth answer of what is Biomutant, I think.
Yeah, I just assume
I'll
that
ever hear
you know anything about it, right? That's what you said.
That is fair. That is fair. I think you've ticked off a lot of my questions too.
Okay.
You mentioned mutations and the sort of the genetic makeup of the character you're playing as. Now, in the footage you provided, I don't know if this was to do with gear or what, but there was one stage where the character is being surrounded by this bubble type thing, and it just transported me back to Sonic 3, Stefan, and I was very happy after I saw that. But was this one of the mutations?
Yeah, so there are two types of, first you have the combat skills, I talked about them, or combos or whatever, unlockable combat skills. Then you have the biogenetics, and the mucus bubble that you mentioned, it's a biogenetic mutation. So biogenetic mutations are the more, let's say, they're more focused on the physical aspects of the character. So let's say character traversal in the world, but also it's an important aspect to mix and match those with combat, right? So for example, the mucus bubble that you mentioned, I can use it to bounce around in the world. I can also use it in combat because it's sticky, right? So enemies will stick to it. And if I use it tactically, I'll jump up and I burst it when I'm at the apex on my jump. They will then burst away and give me some moment, they will be damaged, but also I got like, okay, they're now spread out. Now I can pick them one by one, right? Same goes with the fungi. I don't know if you noticed that. It's a strange mushroom that you place on the ground. I can use it when I'm traversing to reach places where I couldn't access before to bounce, but also I can put it beneath enemies. And now they will start bouncing on that mushroom. And this ties into the core combat system of what we call free flow, and also this mix and match with the combat. It's that we have, similar to Devil May Cry, I guess, like an air combat mode. But in order to get up to that air combat mode, you have to take an enemy and stun him. In stun mode, you can attack him and strike him up into the air. But the shortcut for this then would be like putting this fungi beneath him. That will mean that he bounces up, and the following attack will bring you immediately into airstrike mode. So this is what I call like the creative toolbox for the player. Like we're trying to give you mutations that you can creatively mix and match seamlessly into your combat or traversal. And that's really important for us. So we're more focused on, we don't want to stop the action or what you were doing as a player with a really cool animation. That's not what Biomutant is about. So the biogenetics, I mentioned two of them now, are more focused around that, whilst the psi or psionic mutations, so the X-Men style, are more focused, let's say, on traditional combat attack abilities, but also we have levitate, for example, and I mentioned telekinesis. So there's two ways that you unlock these in the game. So for example, for the biogenetics, if you look at the first cinematic trailer, you will see the main character is like kneeling by a contaminated pool. So those contaminated pools are what you use to unlock biogenetic mutations. And you will find these pools in the open world at derelict nucleus towers, we call them.
If you learn a new mutation or get a new mutation, does that cancel out a different mutation? It doesn't cancel them out. We don't believe in, I call it content locking. I hate it myself. So but we are doing it in one way, and that's the psi mutations. So so we don't have anything that actually negates any other ability. Like if I choose this one, I will never be able to choose that unless
you're talking about the psi mutations. So they're more like the mental ones. So they're tied to your, let's call it karma. So your alignment, or we call it dark or light or red and blue. Let's use that, Mass Effect. So good and evil. So the psionic mutations, they work like that. Like you're making choices in both dialogue and action in the world. I don't want to spoil it. So you're making a choice in dialogue. You're going to get a point for that, that you can use at, let's call them totem poles in the world, to get in touch with your inner self. So when you're meeting with these characters, you make decisions, you get kind of a currency for that. And let's say I'm choosing to play somewhat red. Then there's like generic psi mutations, but there's also a few of them that are red and a few of them that are blue. So that's the only time that we are kind of looking content for you, I guess, in terms of mutations.
From what people have seen so far, like you haven't shown off much of the story aspect or the conversations you mentioned with other characters. Like how much of an impact does that have on the world or your relationships? Like you mentioned the 6 different groups that you can sort of ally with. Like, could you liken it to, I don't know, what's a good example, like a Fallout or something, where if you side with this group, then that will lock out this other group?
It's more like Shadow of Mordor, I guess, light. So when we started this project, we wanted, I call it, an adventure, a journey. So the idea was like, let's not give the player any quest markers. Personally, I was scared about that because I like it, when I know what to do, because I have limited time to play games. So when I sit down, I want to make sure like, okay, all the hard work the developers put in, show me what you got. That's what I want to experience. Even if it's an open world, right? I don't want to spend time looking for what I'm supposed to do or what's the coolest thing. But that was the initial idea, just because we spent so much time on designing this world, right? So we wanted people to explore it. But eventually we had to realize after extensive testing that it was better to give the people what we call a red line, so breadcrumbs, right? So you will always have an active quest marker. Okay, let's say there are 3 aspects to the story. So they will all be involving, you in this red line. So they are your background as a player. Who am I? Why am I here? And where did I come from? And that ties back to this wolf character I was talking about, so the antagonist of the game. So you will meet him several times over the course of the game. And you will also, I spoiled something. I talked about your mom. So let's say you will see more about your history, right? And we will explain a little bit more about what I just said. So that's a part of the story that you will get when you're playing what I said, the red line. If you follow the main story, that's what you will get. The other part is the tribes. So there's currently a tribe war, right? The world is on the brink of a war. And they will ask you to choose sides. So even the key characters, they will like, okay, the world is currently going under if we don't do something. So there's this big tree at the center of the world. It's a representation of the chance the world have to survive. So at the beginning of the game, it's a 50-50 chance, right? And it has 4 routes that stretches out all over the open world. And at the end of each route, there's a huge boss. We call them world eaters. So what you do is like, if I choose in the beginning of the game to ally with a tribe that is red, their goal is going to be to bring down the tree of life, right? So they will say, when you confront the world eater, you will allow it to go back upon the route even closer to the tree, if that makes sense. So then I'm on the path, the road to ruin, right? If I meet a blue leader and I decide to ally with him, then it's going to be the opposite. So that choice, when you're choosing which tribe leader to ally with, that will dictate the end game, if that makes sense. So, But that said, you can change ally anytime during the course of the game.
Just through conversation and...
Yes.
Right,
yes.
Okay.
So let's say I start with the red one. He's going to ask me, so they also have their own goal to how they're going to deal with the other tribes, right? So in that case, he's probably going to say that he wants to vanquish the other tribes. So he will initiate and ask for your help to start a tribe war, and he will say, here are my current rivals, and he will ask you to take over outposts, and eventually when you've done that, to invade the tribe fort. And once you invade the tribe fort, you will meet that other tribe Sifu, the leader, and fight him. And if you succeed, you will kind of conquer that tribe, determine the fate of that leader, and gain the tribe weapon. There are 6 tribes in the game. So there's quite a lot to do there. And they're a little bit different also, the tribes, and spread across the world, right?
Is there any way to be, I know you're going to say the blue and the red, the Paragon and the Renegade. Is there any way to pick the green option, pick the middle option in any way?
We call it balanced, yeah. You can do it, but this was kind of daunting, because, me and another guy, we wrote the script. It's quite a big script. And, we were like, okay, what are the consequences? How much, content lookout are we going to have if people are choosing one path over the other one? And then we found some data, like, I don't know if this is true, but it seemed like 90% of the people chose to play as good in Mass Effect. So we were like, oh, okay. So we're going to write pretty much half of the script is going to be void. So that wasn't so motivating. So we did a special take on this where the complete dialogue or the complete setup is not looking you out of content. It's more in the bigger decisions are dictated by that. And also, like I said, the abilities. And there's also another aspect of this, which I cannot talk about because I spoil everything. It has to do with the ending as well.
You mentioned Breath of the Wild now a number of times, and how when you first started developing the game, you were thinking about not having quest markers and allowing people to discover the world just through play, essentially. And it sounds like, you've created quite a large world here. There's a lot of vehicles, if you want to call a horse a vehicle. How do you make sure that this large world doesn't feel barren? Somebody can say that they've created this massive sprawling world, but they haven't filled it with things to do. Like, are there many side quests?
Yes. I mean, this is one of the reasons also why, we've been working a while on this game, right? I mean, it's a big game. It's by far the biggest game I've ever been part of working on, and I worked on some pretty big games.
I was just about to say, really?
Yeah.
For anyone that doesn't know, you've Just Cause, Mad Max, 2 big, large-scale open-world series. Would you say that Biomutant would be the largest?
Yeah, not size-wise, right? But I think the complexity of the toolbox that you have as a player, the ability you have to combine all of these different abilities, features, and you talked about vehicles, the amount of characters that are in the game, just purely from a number, the amount of dialogue that is in the game. So for me, it's been by far the most complex project. And it's crazy, I know. We're only 20 people. But let me go back to answer your question. So the world is structured in the way that I talked about, this red line. So if you follow that, you will always be involved in the tribe war. You will always meet the characters that we call key characters that have the most impact on the story. These characters that they build these vehicles for you to take on the world eaters. You will always meet those. But then you have a wide cast of, let's call them side characters, that are very, very quirky. So I really hope that people take time and explore the world to find these characters. Some of them are classical, they want you to help them with something. And the idea that we had there is when they help you, when you help them, instead of just getting XP or gold, you will get some kind of, let's call it more memorable reward, or something that is a little bit quirky. The end game has opportunities that are related to all characters in the game. So you're going to make choices that are important for the ending with all the characters. So if you find a favorite character that you get some kind of connection with, remember that character. And then you have, let's call them, in development, we call them Witcher villages. So it's your standard village or we call them an enclave. So those are, people that are trying to survive, and these animals, not people, they built their own village and they're trying to survive. So the same thing there is they will have quests for you. They also have things where they point you to interesting places in the world. Might be like an underground bunker that has a puzzle challenge for you. It can be really hard to find it. So some of those characters will be helpful in allowing you to find it, because some of these underground bunkers from the old world might have a really interesting reward. And then you have what we call old world interacts or events. So there's remnants of the world that existed before this apocalypse that I'm talking about, and there are some cool gadgets there or puzzles that you can solve. So it's quite a lot. So I hope that people won't feel disappointed. I mean, we put a lot of work into the world, and one of the feedback that we are getting is that it's quite interesting to explore.
So we mentioned earlier that you worked on both Mad Max and Just Cause. Were you able to take any knowledge from working on those series and put it into practice for Biomutant?
Yeah, all the mistakes. Let's not try to make them again, right? So, so you know, all the mistakes we made. But it's been, I mean, at Avalanche, we had proprietary technology. You know, I was there for 10 years, you know, started with the first Just Cause. As an art director, I think in the beginning I was also lead artist, but it doesn't really matter. And at the end I was game director, so I shifted a little bit onto the design side as well. But I think that's the takeaway. I mean, making these kind of, you know, really big open world games, it's super complex. And Avalanche is a fantastic studio, really skilled at doing that, right? So I think together at Avalanche, we learned a lot. And in the beginning, you know, we also built the tech, we built the game, and we also built up the studio, right? So in a way, this is what we did with the Experiment 101 as well, right? We started with 3 people, me and 2 other guys, starting to build a game, and then we went to Unreal. I never worked in Unreal. I only worked in proprietary tech, right? So that was a big shift for us. So we had to make a lot of, you know, proprietary technology on top of Unreal to make sure that we could actually make this game. And I think, coming back to your question, I think a lot of the, let's say, manual designs that I did for art content for Just Cause 1, the way that I was thinking there, we kind of used the same approach here. I mean, from a content density perspective. I'm not talking about the terrain or vegetation. I'm talking like, oh, here's location, which characters are the main content. How are we working with that? In terms of, I would say also from an art direction perspective, I wanted to go back and do something really, really colorful. I sometimes joked about like, okay, we have a color TV for a reason. So if you compare just the Just Cause series, it's quite, I mean, the intention that we had from the beginning was to make a really vibrant and colorful game. So I think that's also something that you will see in Biomutant.
Finally, when can people expect to be playing Biomutant? You said you're a fan of spoiling things, so, you know, world exclusive here.
Yeah, this is by far the most common question. And I'm really happy and humbled that we're actually getting this question, because, you know, it's tough enough to make a game and to have people's interest, and that's super tough. When you develop a big game like this, you know, the release dates might shift. What is important is releasing a game when it's ready. What's been really fantastic for me personally is working with THQ, right? Because they've given us this patience as well. Like I said, I've been working in games for quite a long time, almost 25 years now, and this is by far the best, you know, understanding I've met from the commercial side. And I think also we have some understanding from the gamers, and I hope that will continue, even though that people are like, yeah, come on already, you worked on it for so long. We're going to announce the release date, maybe sooner than a lot of people think, when we feel as a group together that release date is going to be the date when people can play the game. I think we will be able to speak more about that sooner than later, about the date. So, but not today. I'm sorry.
Biomutant is shaping up nicely, isn't it? Let us know in the comments if you're looking forward to Zelda with cats. And if you liked this video, do please like this video by clicking on the thumbs up button. If you want more Rock Paper Shotgun in your life, there are 2 videos on screen now that might take your fancy. And if you want to know when things go live on the channel, it's very simple. Just hit subscribe and then ring that bell. Thank you very much for watching, you absolute star. We hope to see you again real soon.